Introduce our next panel. This will be on match fixing and anti-doping issues, which have always been an issue in traditional sports, but in esports it's only starting to become very visible. So we do want to find out the issues in esports and discuss ways of prevention and ways of dealing with these. So allow me to introduce the panelists for tonight's session on clean esports. Starting with Mr. Patrick Nally, founder of West Nally and president of the International Federation of Poker, also acknowledged as the father of modern sports marketing. Up next, Mr. Sean Conroy, vice president of Genius Sports and former head of partnerships of Sports Integrity Monitor. Mr. Tim Reichert, head of the eSports division of FC Schalke 04. Ms. Anna Rozwandowicz, eSports Integrity Coalition Director. Kevin Morris, eSports Managing Director at the Daily Dot. So a big thank you to all of our panelists and for all of you for attending this panel discussion on clean esports and how to maintain that in the esports environment as opposed to the traditional environment as well, or in concert with that. And so we do want to discuss that and discuss what some of the issues are. So maybe starting at the far end and then working towards my direction. So Kevin, in your work at the Daily Dot, maybe talk about what you've experienced as far as some of the issues regarding integrity in esports.
Okay, yeah. Well, you know, we in the media, we love a good scandal, you know, for better or worse. And in esports, esports is a young industry. There are, you know, there's new money coming in. There are people starting businesses without experience. There are a lot of issues that come up pretty regularly. And we investigate them. You know, the Daily Dot kind of made a name for itself investigating all kinds of scandals, match fixing. We exposed one of the biggest match fixing scandals in esports history, the CSGO scandal with the iBuyPower team a couple years ago. And I think, you know, with the Daily Dot, what we're interested in, we are an esports focused website. So when we report on this stuff, it's kind of because we want to be a check on the industry. But the issue is that it can spiral into something else entirely when it goes into the mainstream. And I think for such a young industry, it's very dangerous when something like match fixing or skin gambling, especially like with underage, unregulated skin betting, it can, if it goes into the mainstream media, it can create an image or a sense of risk around the industry. It's scary to investors. The last panel talked a little bit about you know, the importance of parents and their you know, the effect that they have on young esports athletes. And if the industry appears risky, if it appears unregulated, that affects parents in you know, encouraging their kids to get involved in esports. And it also affects fans. Fans will lose interest. So, you know, everyone on this panel is going to agree it's incredibly important to keep esports clean. because this kind of stuff does get exposed, and if it exists, it gets exposed, either through a media organization like mine or some Reddit user that just finds something and exposes it on Reddit.
And so to give a better understanding of maybe the holistic picture of things like match fixing, Anna, maybe you can talk about what you've done as far as increasing integrity in that regard.
Sure. Hello, everybody. So to Kevin's earlier point, I don't think we're talking about something extraordinary or something really, really special when we talk about integrity in esports. So I think for a lot of aspects of that, it's common sense and better judgment, right? I think everybody in the room can agree that you shouldn't cheat. So ESL has taken its first steps into organized approach to protecting and for the promoting integrity in esports by organizing and joining the esports first integrity coalition. And what we've done is we brought people on board who researched the ways in which you can cheat in esports. There are a couple of ways you can do it. You can cheat to win, which are things like very old school aimbots, wall hacks, stuff like that, things that are very, very easily to be spotted during the game and on the stream. You can cheat to lose, which is when match fixing comes on board. There's also the corruption aspect, in which you can try to bribe tournaments officials. And then there's the doping. So we have joined the coalition. ESL as an esports organizer has joined the coalition, the ESIC, and we, together with a couple of other parties and people, trying to come together and figure out the way and policies and regulations to tackle that.
Absolutely, and so you're coming more from the aspect of an integrity organization, but moving on to Mr. Reichert as somebody directly involved in the sports organization themselves, what are some of the things that you do specifically to increase and encourage integrity?
First of all, it's for us as a sports organization, it's a super important topic. We try to avoid everything, anything about kind of cheating or keeping the esports clean. Honestly, when we did our research and when we analyzed the esport market, this was one of our concerns before our entrance in the esport market, because it's really young. A lot of money is coming into the market. It's tempting for young people, and we're talking about, from the player's perspective, most likely of young people. So we was kind of afraid of that. So what we are doing is all of our players got a kind of a talk before we signed them, and we made our statement kind of clear that there is no way to cheat in any kind of in any form, to avoid anything about that. If they got offers or kind of the idea about that, come directly to us. Never ever think about that. So if you just imagine or remember the Tour de France, how big it was kind of the most important sports event in the year. Nowadays no one talking about that. Why is that? Because of the doping scandals. And I think our partners and sponsors also require a clean environment, so as we, and yeah, that's why it's so important for us.
Absolutely important for any line of the food chain, whether it's organizations or tournament organizers or sponsors. Very important to maintain that clean esports aspect. So moving on a little bit down the line, so to Sean, as your work pertains, maybe not directly involved as directly involved as an esports organization, but maybe talk a little bit about how you notice and encourage integrity in esports.
Yeah, so by way of a quick introduction to Genius Sports, we're a sports data and integrity company. We work with over 200 sports leagues and federations internationally. That ranges from some of the largest sports organizations in the world, like the International Olympic Committee, FIFA, the Premier League, Major League Baseball, right down the pyramid to amateur and grassroots level of sports. these relationships have given us a kind of broad base of understanding, a broad basis of experience in developing and implementing betting integrity programs across different sports and across different regions. And over the last couple of years, we've invested heavily in eSports. We've developed eSports-specific algorithms and data processing systems that gives us the ability to monitor the integrity of eSports betting markets in real time. Off the back of this investment in technology, we've formed long-term partnerships with eSports companies and event organizers such as the E-League, as well as some of the largest regulated sports betting companies in the world who have taken an interest in offering eSports betting products. Companies such as Sky Bet, Betway, and Danske Spil, the Danish lottery. So I'm hoping that as part of this panel discussion and the conversations that I'm sure will continue this afternoon and this evening, is to help share with everybody who has an interest in protecting eSports competitions from match fixing, to make them aware that there are tools and measures that are available and that can be implemented to safeguard the integrity of their events.
Absolutely. Tools very important to maintaining the integrity in different events. And to Mr. Patrick Nally, maybe you can add a little bit more to that and talk about some of your experiences with integrity in some of the events that you've been involved in.
I think the important thing is we're trying to discuss how to make a successful international federation for eSports. And of course, where there is money, there is corruption. I've been involved with some very, very successful sports over the years, and we've been reading and we've been seeing exactly what money can do in terms of encouraging match fixing, encouraging corruption, in terms of enhanced drug usage perhaps for performance. So it's a real issue, and it is a real issue. If we go back some years to when a Canadian, Dick Pound, obviously wanted to do something about the obvious drug abuse in sport, and he wanted to create WADA. WADA would have no influence, it would have no ability to do anything unless it got governments to be supportive. Now, the media again may say some governments have taken it a little too sort of laxed, but the fact is that WADA would not have been able to come into existence unless countries signed the anti-convention, which they signed. It meant that the IOC that was supporting WADA needed to get governmental help through UNESCO, which is a United Nations agency. So it was UNESCO and the United Nations agency that went to the ministers, the sports ministers, the health ministers, the ministers of individual countries, to get across to them to why signing this convention was extremely important, not just for the Olympic movement, but for the sport movement as a whole. So if this movement is going to be a movement that does worry about young people, that does worry about corruption, does worry about match fixing and all the things that inevitably you're going to face because of the amount of money that is now coming into eSports, as an organization, you've got to get governments to be aware, like we saw in the presentation earlier, that the Korean government is supporting the approach by putting the right police and the right authorities into the system. I think in China, clearly, again, it's clear that they are doing the same. There is a need for all governments around the world to be supportive, to be understanding, to be part of this education to why, as eSports becomes the massive success that it is, that young people do need to be protected, they do need education, you do need the resources and the organizations and bodies that will make a protection work.
Absolutely. So talking about the organizations that are needed to make that sort of integrity monitoring work, maybe open this up to the entire panel, but in an ideal world, there wouldn't be any cheating or any match fixing, but because there is, what kind of institutions need to be put in place to monitor those when it comes specifically to eSports?
I think we can draw parallels from other sports and lessons about how to deal with issues, and obviously some sports have dealt better with these issues than other sports. But in our experience, an effective kind of, this is in the areas of betting integrity and anti-match fixing, a successful program has three main core aspects. First is establishing the appropriate regulations, the rules and regulations, the governance processes, whether it be specifically prohibiting the passing of inside information or illegal betting, which it may seem like a basic thing, but many esports organizations that I've dealt with so far do not have these basic provisions into their rules and regulations. Whistleblowing hotlines, for example, places for people to go with information to report an approach from a match fixer. So there's a whole kind of policy and regulations angle which needs to be dealt with up front. The second part is education and awareness building. That's got a couple of different strands to it. There's education of the players and the participants and all the stakeholders who have an influence in the outcome of a match. They need to be very clear on what their responsibilities are to the game. There were some stories shared earlier from the gentleman at Casper around the approach of the players, and of course we're often dealing with very young players who may not realise that passing one piece of information may constitute inside information, and that person then goes place bets, make lots of money, comes back and says you're now complicit in a match fixing ring, can continue to work with me on this. So there's education of the players and making them aware of the repercussions and the sanctions that are involved. Then there's also the education of the administrators, the policy makers, and those developing the structures in place at the league. And lastly is kind of the monitoring, the investigations, and kind of the enforcement aspect. So if you're running an esports competition, you have responsibility for one, you need to be able to actually detect the things that are going on. You need to be able to find out when something has happened, have a process for getting the information, building a case, investigating it, putting it through a disciplinary process, and getting the result that you need in terms of ridding the sport of the people involved. So I think in our experiences is those three kind of core aspects are something that anyone running an esports organisation should consider.
And of course, if you have that position where it has been well defined, it's been well structured, then it's up to the individual national federations to share that with their own governments. As I've said, because you're dealing with youth, you're going to get support from governments to be supportive. But if it's a united approach and everybody's got that clear understanding that the education is there, that's going to make life a lot easier for everybody. And because you're the young, dynamic sport that everybody's looking up to, because everybody wants what you have got the opportunity to take the initiative and take the lead, not sit back and wait to where you face the problems that you know you're going to face. Take the initiative, take the lead now, and lead the pathway forward rather than wait to face the issues when they arrive.
And speaking of taking that initiative...
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Sean said earlier. I think that regulation, education, and monitoring are very important aspects of safeguarding integrity in esports. But I think another key aspect to it will be collaboration between all bodies and organizations, tournament organizers, betting platforms providers, and everybody who is involved in esports should collaborate. And one very specific example, one very specific problem that ESIC is tackling right now is recognition of sanctions. So very specifically, if I am a CSGO player and I play in an ESL tournament and I'm cheating, and I've been caught and found guilty, so I'm banned from ESL, that means nothing if I can go and play in MLG or Gfinity. So tournament organizers and everybody else should collaborate on it, and that's something that will take some time to come together and really align on those issues.
And it makes sense to say, okay, well, this guy cheated here, obviously that should have broader repercussions, but if there's no infrastructure behind that or agreement or cooperation, then obviously that has less of an impact. And I know you actually mentioned yesterday, Tim, an example of some of your players and the esports that they participate in, and maybe being put at a disadvantage when it comes to maintaining that integrity.
Yeah, we facing this problem right now with our FIFA players. It is I think it's well known that online FIFA events are. There is a lot of cheating. Our players are for sure not allowed to cheat, so it's kind of tough for them to get to the online qualifiers, to the big events, if you are not allowed to. So that's for us a big problem. Also, from the perspective, what kind of titles we will add in the future, because honestly, we cannot add titles like that where you cannot compete online or be able to compete because of these lags. So it's really difficult for us to handle that, and it's kind of a new market and hard to handle, but we need to figure out how to work with that. So we are for sure talking with ESL, for example, or EA about that, and they are aware and they try to do anything in their power to change that.
Very difficult to compete or to value as even like a sponsor an esports field when you know that there either aren't things being done to curb corruption or that there is that there, so further emphasizing the need for regulation.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar point. I imagine that the same decision-making process that you have to go through, Tim, when you decide which titles to involve yourself with is being made all the time by prospective commercial partners and new sponsors. And we have some experience working with regulated sports betting companies and state lotteries when they're looking to see whether they add esports as a product to their sports betting portfolio. One of the questions that they often ask is, what is being done for game integrity? You know, are procedures in place? Is the governance right? Can I be confident that what I'm seeing is fair competition, and therefore I can offer the right prices and begin to start taking bets with confidence? Now, it may not be that concerning to many people, these decisions from betting companies, but I think it's probably emblematic of wider kind of commercial and investment decisions in the sport.
Right, definitely relevant even outside of betting because it's an integrity issue. No matter where it impacts, whether it's with betting or with players directly or with sponsors looking into esports, there's a wide impact of integrity in esports.
One thing that we didn't really talk about, I think that to a certain extent this all kind of goes back into the theme from the previous presentation about protecting players. I mean, not all of it, but I think that the education aspect is huge. These are kids. They don't understand what they're getting into. They don't understand the ramifications of what they do to their own careers or to even the industry. I don't think that they understand that if they're caught up in a major max fixing scandal that it will actually affect future generations. And I also think that one really important thing is that players need to be making more money. There was a guy, I can't remember, it was a Dota 2 scandal, a gambling scandal, and the guy made $322 for throwing a match. You have players throwing matches for skins, and they earn more in skins than they do in salary, which is not really a problem in, like the NFL, right? I mean, you're not going to earn more money gambling. So that's not really, there's not really any kind of industry regulation that's going to make that happen. But I think as the industry gets bigger, thinking about that kind of thing and, making sure that the industry isn't too top heavy, that only the top players are making good money and all the bottom, players at the bottom are relatively poor, that's not healthy for the industry either.
But what you're saying in terms of the appetite of the media to follow up on scandals, a very good friend of mine used to run FIFA, and he doesn't run FIFA any longer. But the appetite of the media is such that they will pursue, once they pick up the story, they're going to run with the story. So I'm not in the industry other than I'm the president of the International Federation of Poker, which is launching match poker that will be, again, it will be an e-sport. It will be all played on the mobile as an e-sport. But my concern, because even with the name poker starts thinking about gaming, gambling, the sensitivities of this is enormous, and the industry could suffer immensely, if this sort of gathered a momentum and governments started then putting restrictions because they should be concerned about young people. We all should be concerned about young people. So we can't take it lightly. As you know yourself, the media point of view, it could kill it, and kill it as quickly as it grows. So it's one of those things that just shouldn't be tucked around. Let's get round to doing something about this, in a few years' time when we've got maybe a few more sponsors and things. Unless the fundamentals are put in place now, this tremendous boom that you're experiencing could come to a very, very sudden halt.
And the media is very excited about esports, because it's a buzzword in Silicon Valley for investors. It's a hot new thing, and they'll be even more excited when they can throw in a scandal into the mix. Those two combined is fire for the media. So absolutely.
And it should be pointed out that it's not that necessarily the fault of the media for doing this. It's the fault of the industry and the actual lack of integrity in the first place.
I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with the media running with it. If it's a big story, it's a big story, and if the audience is there, the audience is there for it. I do think that there's a very large potential risk of mainstream media not understanding the industry and not understanding the nuances of it. We report on things for an esports audience. An example is, I think it was last year, a Cloud9 Counter-Strike player said that his whole team was on Adderall at a tournament, and it blew into this whole big media firestorm. It was just a single interview with a single guy making huge claims about drug use within the entire industry. And when it left the esports media, it became something bigger than it really was. There is not an epidemic of drug use among esports players. So yeah, there's a lot of risk when it leaves the esports industry bubble, for sure.
Yeah, it's on that topic. It's lots of the partners that we work with in the sports integrity space are very large, well-established sports. People like the Premier League, people like Major League Baseball, and for the reasons that you articulated earlier, you're very unlikely to find a Premier League football match fixed due to the economics. You'd have to pay a lot of money to get control of a referee and the defenders and so on. But a large part of what the Premier League do when they invest in education programs and they invest in monitoring programs and generally the whole infrastructure around sports integrity is such that when that person comes from the media, when there is a rumor, when something comes up on a forum that says, I heard this and this is fixed, that they actually have a position that they can take publicly that says, these are the processes that we have in place. These are the methods for detection. This is the reach that we have into the betting industry. And actually, we've conducted a full investigation with all the experts that we work with, and we can tell you that we haven't found anything. Now, that if you're Richard Scudamore, the CEO of the Premier League, that's a much easier conversation to have than I don't think anything happened, but I actually have no clue because I can't tell you what's going on in the betting markets. I haven't really educated my players. So a lot of the investment in this sort of stuff is kind of belt on braces and the ability to deal with sometimes sensationalist claims from different parts of the media, and that's something that sports at the moment, like tennis, for example, they're dealing with on an almost a daily basis, and the problems are kind of their own doing, really.
It reminds me of the line that with great powers comes great responsibilities. And if this industry is trying to be what clearly it is trying to be, a very well-disciplined, very well-structured sport, then this aspect has to be monitored and put into place, I think, extremely quickly.
Absolutely. So maybe discussing the effectiveness of the implements that have been put into play, whether it's regulatory agencies or whether it's self-policing by esports organizations. Maybe an open question for the entire panel is, what are the steps that need to be taken to move forward? There's obviously things being done right now to curb lack of integrity in esports, but what are the next steps for the industry to take?
I'll have a crack.
Go for it.
First, again, the whole basis of what we've been hearing is based on a conventional sports body in that it's made up of its national memberships. So its national memberships need to, I think, obviously take integrity as part of their activities, maybe obviously have somebody appointed and identified that is specifically into this area of integrity, to start and establish a dialogue with the other bodies that exist that are working with other sports, certainly working with the National Olympic Committees and working with the ministries and the government channels that exist, because this isn't just exclusive to where we are. This is every day. So unless it becomes sort of clear that it's an integral part of your planning, integral part of your day-to-day activity, it will run away from you. So let's get it right now. Let's get it into the national federations in the right way, get more national federations so that they can also be doing more, but it needs to become a core part, a core concern, because of the reasons that we've outlined.
I recognise that it might not be the best example or parallel to draw based on recent circumstances, but the way that FIFA deal with these issues in football is that FIFA themselves develop a set of standard rules and regulations and education procedures that they then make available to all of the international federations that sit underneath FIFA. The different national federations are required to appoint a single integrity officer who's a point of contact between FIFA and the particular national federations. FIFA conduct the monitoring, and the investigation and the analysis in partnership with whoever the integrity officer is on the local level. And I think that that's probably not a bad model to go down, with kind of advisory sort of control and suggestions made at an international level, then being implemented on a national level. For a key sort of governance issue like this, I think it's not a bad way to go.
Absolutely. So winding down, any final thoughts from any of our panelists as we move towards our Q&A session? Just a reminder, if you have any thoughts, definitely think about them and then bring them up here in just a few minutes. So closing thoughts for any of our panelists on the issues of cleanliness in the esports environment that involves things other than janitors. Those are important too.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, I think the title of the panel is Clean Esport Environment, and I don't think I've ever been in any conversation with any sport or anyone associated with sport who doesn't accept that match fixing and doping are bad things. And I think obviously the next stage and the important stage is how do you implement the processes and the procedures and the things that you need to do to actually protect your sport. And importantly, how do you get people to care and people to invest in this stuff before it's too late? Because there's lots of examples in lots of sports, particularly actually in this part of the world. Football suffered massively in Southeast Asia. Whole professional football leagues have collapsed in Malaysia just off the back of endemic corruption and match fixing. And because the supporters, why would they watch their local team when they're convinced it's fixed? They'll just watch the Premier League on in the UK because I can trust the integrity of that event, and that's why that's been such a large kind of commercial success as a league. So I think it's very important, but it's quite difficult to get people to invest in these things early and get ahead of it and be proactive, because typically they wait for the disaster and then start picking up the pieces after.
I think, to your point, Sean, part of the reason why it's so difficult to get people to care about it is because people simply don't know. Education is going to be so important in the next year. So we have held the first ESIC educational session at IEM Katowice earlier this year, and all CSGO players were attending, and there were so many questions. There were a lot of people who just simply didn't know what's okay, what's not okay. Hey, can I take this medication? How do I find out if I can take it? Where do I go if I see something suspicious? So I think, actually, to answer your earlier question, education is going to be number one priority for the next 2-3 years.
All right. Well, those are definitely some of the important priorities for maintaining integrity in esports. So if there are any questions from the audience at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open the floor. If you just raise your hand, then we'll go ahead and direct your questions to our panelists. So I see a question right there in the middle.
Hi, Felipe Montoya from Costa Rica. I have three questions actually. So the first is about public perception on the issue of integrity, because it seems to me, and it is self-evident for all the people here, that cheating is wrong and doping is wrong as well. But it seems the public doesn't understand the issue is as grave as we think. Because, for example, I recall Duncan Shields, Thorin, it's a very renowned eSports journalist, tweeting about how eSports organizations are working on solving the wrong issues, like doping and integrity issues. And he got a lot of support from that. And I think people don't really see the importance on this. So I want to know if there are steps being taken to showcase to people how important it is to defend integrity in esports, because maybe the general public doesn't understand how important it is. That's the first question. The second question is what will be the right model to handle integrity issues, because we have the Riot model where they are the jury and judge and prosecutor at the same time, and it has proven to be problematic. And then we have the Valve model where they largely ignore their tournaments until something really big comes up and then they have to clean up. So should it be left to the game developers to handle the integrity issues? Should it go to independent organizations, or how should it be handled? And the third one is a question addressed to Mr. Schoen and Mrs. Anna, because I would like to know what's the official stance on betting, because I know Genius Sports supports betting through their platform, but I don't know from an integrity perspective what's the stance for esports representatives, because I know betting helps the industry grow, it makes it popular and makes it easier for people to get into and interested, but at the same time it opens the door for a lot of issues, integrity issues to get in. So I would like to know the official stance on betting as well.
I can try the first one in regards to Thorin. I think to a certain extent, if there's a portion of the esports fan base that doesn't understand why integrity matters and why match fixing is bad and why doping is bad, to a certain extent, that doesn't really matter. What really matters is that the people in charge, that the people running the organizations, that the people in charge of the teams, that they recognize it. And the players, of course, too. But because these are the people that are going to be educating players and so on and so forth. I mean, the only way that you could maybe educate skeptics, I think it'll just, they might have to learn the hard way, you know? I mean, when a scandal does break out, it won't be pretty. And then suddenly they'll realize why it matters.
Can I add something? I couldn't agree more, actually, but as Kevin said, at the end of the day, we, the people in this room, have the obligation to provide a level playing ground for everybody. So we have the tools and we have the power to make sure that we are protecting the players, once again, and protecting the industry. So whilst the general public or a portion of esports fans might not exactly understand why we're doing it, we know why we're doing it, and this is our responsibility.
Which one are you going to go for? I was going to go for the betting one, number 3. Shall I do that? The point on betting is that, and this is the same with esports as any sport, is that betting will exist regardless of whether regulators, sports governing bodies, or anyone involved with the sport likes it or not. And so then you kind of end up with a dilemma. Do I ignore it and leave it in the unregulated black markets, which actually with esports is what's going on now? Industry estimates that there will be $8 billion bet on esports in 2016, and 7.5 billion of that is through skin betting sites, which is effectively completely unregulated black market of gambling with no probity over the people running the websites. They're not compelled by any licensing regime to run Know Your Customer, age verification, and you have children placing large bets, probably using their parents' money and losing lots of money in that kind of environment. As a governing body or as an esports organizer, you have no way to get information from those gambling operators if match fixing has taken place. They're not compelled or impelled to provide you any information. So that kind of environment, and we see this in different parts of the world, in the US, which has an illegal gambling market, as well as here in China, that actually the unregulated model is more dangerous for the integrity of sport than the regulated model. And in the regulated model, like you have in the UK, you have proper bona fide organisations who have to go through a very stringent licensing process before they can offer bets on sports. They often have commercial relationships with the sports federation, so there's new revenue opportunities through licensing of data and video and sponsorship. And through those relationships, you get a sharing of information, supporting investigations into match fixing. So our position as a company is always that a regulated, clean environment for betting is better than an unregulated black market.
And in terms of what to do, making a couple of observations. Many traditional sports today are suffering from relevance because they're coming to a point where people are beginning to say, are they relevant because of some of the things that they're facing in terms of their own issues and making it even more challenging to the relevance of some traditional sports. You are in a different dilemma. On the one hand, you're a very different sort of sport because you don't control much of what you do. There are so many different parties involved. It's going to be very difficult to try and get a disciplined line just by asking everybody to collaborate with you. However, the relevance that you have is extraordinary. The relevance of the way you communicate to young people, the way that your industry is just exploding, means that everybody is fascinated and interested in your industry. So as an industry, you ought to capture that moment with governments and government bodies and the bodies that exist that are there to assist and to help. Because governments have got exactly the same interests. So rather than get them to a point where they'll come against you, why not get them involved now and embrace it, maybe through UNESCO doing something similar to what WADA did, but take the initiative. Show that the industry can take the initiative rather than sit back and wait till when it hits you in the face.
All right, thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question. I'm just going to point ambiguously over here in this direction. Probably go to the table in the front there.
Yeah, hi. Actually, my question, so everybody understands that, we need a clean environment, right? But the question there is that, who's the person who's going to take the lead? Should the game developer take the lead? Should it be event organizers? Or it should be the federation? Because somebody ultimately has to lay down the rules so that, everybody comes on a common page and, starts following those regulations.
For me, it's very, very simple. That if you are orientating yourself the sporting route, that you are an e-sport, that you are an international federation, you're looking for recognition from the IOC, from Sport Accord and others, the international federation has to take that initiative. Just as we were being described, we had a flip remark about FIFA being not responsible, but FIFA have a very, very responsible approach, and there are other federations that equally have very, very responsible approaches. You could learn a lot by being part of that same very responsible approach to your sport.
So would that mean that ESIC, ISIC should work with the federation for that? Because what I understand is ISIC is also kind of doing the same thing.
We would absolutely love to work with anybody in this room who wants to talk about integrity in their country, in their league, in their organization. So please come to me after the panel and let's start a conversation.
I think in reality there's probably ideal ways of doing it, but you can just wait for these things to happen, or you could just take control of whatever area of interest you have in the industry. If you're running a small event, you shouldn't necessarily wait for the people above you or the International Federation to take action. Perhaps you should just employ your own measures.
All right, well, thank you very much for your attention and for your wonderful questions. That is going to close our time discussing the cleanliness of our esports environment. So once again, thank you to everyone for attending, and big thanks to our panelists for their expert answers.